1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Good morning and welcome to the Maryland Public Service Commission's administrative meeting for September 7th, 2022. Before we get started today, I'd just like to reflect on the hiring challenging environment for most any organizations and government agencies during this period. We do our best to stock our ranks with the most qualified and skilled regulatory professionals and administrative professionals, although it is challenging during these difficult times. That said, while we're not rolling back our requirements for employees of this agency, we are redoubling our efforts in terms of marketing our positions, reaching out to younger talent who want to enter the utility regulatory sector. And last night, a couple of our staff, including the Director of Consumer Affairs and the Deputy Executive Secretary, went to the University of Maryland College Park to recruit for a number of positions that we currently have open. So I'd like to market them today. We have a number of investigative positions open in our compliance and enforcement unit. These are the specialists that keep an eye on our retail supply industry in the state and make sure that everything is above board. There are 2 positions, and you can find them at the very bottom of the PSC homepage. Additionally, we have a very important position, the Deputy Director of our Electricity Division. That position is also open and can be found currently posted. All of these positions actually close tomorrow at midnight, so if anybody on YouTube or in the audience know individuals who may be interested in joining the ranks of the Public Service Commission, please inquire within. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Mr. Chairman, since this is the last time this week that we'll meet in formal session, I wanted to take a moment to mark a milestone that will be coming up in a few days, and that is the 21st anniversary of the terror attacks in this country of September 11th, 2001. And we lost thousands of Americans that day, and we also lost thousands of Americans in the 20 years of war that ensued, or wars that ensued. And I think it's appropriate that we just note that as something that changed many of our lives, most of our lives, if not all of our lives forever. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. A solemn reminder. It's hard to believe that more than 2 decades have since passed. We do have meeting minutes to approve from our last meeting of August 31st, 2022. The vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The meeting minutes are approved. Mr. Secretary, good morning.
Mr. Chairman, there are 3 items on today's consent agenda. Item number 1 is an application from Octopus Energy LLC for a license to supply electricity. Item number 2 is a notification of name change from Energy Watch LLC and Watchwire LLC. And item number 3 is weather station designations from Chesapeake Utilities Corporation.
We'll start with questioning from the commissioners. Commissioner O'Donnell.
I got a question on item number 1.
And if the representatives from Octopus Energy are here, are they here? They are not.
Okay. Mr. Zhang, thank you for entertaining my questions. First of all, will Evolve Retail Energy LLC be doing any business in the state of Maryland, assuming that we ultimately approve this item?
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. Michael Jang on behalf of staff. My understanding is that Octopus Energy acquired Evolve, and thus Evolve was later name changed to do business under Octopus, so it is possible.
Okay.
But in addition, if I may add, they did, from my understanding, revamp their marketing and training materials to make sure that Evolve was more compliant with Octopus Energy's services.
So you detail in the buck sheet the nature of the complaints, 1 related to customer service, 3 complaints relating to slamming, and 6 complaints related to rate and charges. And since these companies are now combined, that's a pretty significant history. Do you know over what time period those complaints came in?
Yes, so we received some information from the company itself. They indicated that the complaints range from March 17th of 2021 to August 13th of 2021.
So they're pretty recent.
That is correct.
Do we have a sense that they understand we take this very, very seriously, these slamming complaints and these other complaints?
Yes, so I do believe that they do understand that want to be compliant with all regulatory matters, of course.
Of course, that's
State
the
of
right
Maryland.
answer. They're going to
Yeah,
say that.
of course. I will say, so although these complaints are fairly compact in the time frame they happened, a lot of them actually were due to some acquisitions that they received. Some of them were not specifically specifically against the company itself, but the company that maybe sold some of their customers to Octopus.
Does the company have a physical presence in Maryland?
That I'm not sure, but I can definitely find out if you would like.
Okay. Is there any timeliness component to this item? In other words, if we waited a week and brought it back, would that upset the apple cart in any way?
I do not believe so.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'd like to hold item number 1 for a week, and maybe we can get the company here one way or another next week to explain to us so we can judge the efficacy of their claims that they want to be in compliance with all of our laws, because there was a time when we kind of just stamped these consent items, but we've learned a lot over the last few years with regard to consumer protections and customer complaints, and I, for one, am not interested in just letting it slide by easily.
As noted, I will let the company know.
Do you commissioners have questions on the Octopus item? If not, we will hold this item open for one additional week. And Mr. Jang, yes, please let counsel for Octopus Energy know that their presence is compelled. Commissioner O'Donnell gives me a segue to note the most recent quarterly results, Q2 of 2022, with respect to our report card for retail supply. And I'm continuing to be happy to announce that quarter over quarter, since we initiated the report card back in 2019, we've seen a substantial decline in the number of parties that are effectively tripping this wire and publicly making the report card. We do have a few new additions, which is unfortunate. We have Clean Choice Energy doing business as Ethical Energy, also doing business as Clean Choice Option, and also doing business as Clean Choice Energy. 4 names there for one company. We have Planet Energy doing business as Right Rate Energy, doing business as Value Plus Energy. 3 names for one company. We have RPA Energy doing business as Green Choice Energy. And finally, we have a company that has tripped the screens multiple times over the course of the past 12 months. That is SFE Energy Maryland. We will continue to look at trends, and to the extent that retail suppliers continually trip the screens and continually we find in favor of the customer as opposed to the company, those companies will undergo greater scrutiny. We'll issue the Q3 results sometime in October. Any additional questions on remaining consent agenda items? Seeing and hearing none, with respect to item number 2, I would move that we note the filing, and with respect to item number 3, I would move that we approve the weather station designations for the purpose of determining when there is an extreme weather period that requires restrictions on electric and natural gas service terminations under COMAR 20.31.3.3 and COMAR 20.31.3.4. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motions are approved. Mr. Secretary, the administrative agenda.
Mr. Chairman, item number 4 is a request from the Independent Taxi Association, Inc. for implementation of a temporary fuel surcharge.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Mosier and Mr. Gorman.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Jamie Smith on behalf of staff, pinch hitting for Felix Patterson. On July 7th, 2022, the Independent Taxi Association, Inc. filed a request to implement a temporary fuel surcharge for each taxi cab trip its drivers take. This fuel surcharge will remain independent of current rates and will be shown as a separate extra charge. The Independent Taxi Association, Inc. proposes to compute the fuel surcharge on a mileage basis, reflecting the additional cost of fuel used in a specific trip based on the U.S. National Average Diesel Fuel Index. Commission Order Number 80056, issued on June 21, 2005, and Case Number 9028, approved a modified stipulation and agreement, which included a fuel adjustment surcharge based on the price of regular gasoline for Baltimore, Maryland. An adjustment only be made if the requests were made by the Commission staff, OPC, or taxi cab associations representing at least 50% of the permit holders. The Commission approved an increase in the surcharge on August 21, 2008, effective September 1st, 2008. The 2008 surcharge adjustment was based on a summer 2008 price of $4.02 for a gallon of gas. Consequently, after the calculation of surcharge, the mileage rate was set at $2.20 per mile. Order number 82618, issued on April 22, 2009, established temporary rates equivalent to the $2.20 per mile rate, which remains in effect today. As this rate modification request represents less than 50% of the permit holders, even with Z-Trip's August 25, 2022 filing in support of the request, along with current metered rates including a $2.20 per mile rate based on gas price of $4.02 per gallon, which is higher than the price of regular gasoline in Baltimore, Maryland now per AAA, staff concludes the Commission should deny the request without prejudice to implement a temporary fuel surcharge. OPC filed comments on September 2nd, requesting denial of the request also. Mark Gorman, Director of Transportation, and I are available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have counsel for Z-Trip here? We do not. Okay, we have Office of People's Counsel. Ms. Eichner, always take the right podium, please. We did receive your comments. The floor is yours.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Nicole Zeichner on behalf of the Maryland Office of People's Counsel. We echo staff's concerns regarding the request for a temporary fuel surcharge adjustment. We don't believe, the requisite number of permit holders have not been met, and that would be pursuant to a 2005 settlement agreement that was approved by the Commission in regard to temporary fuel surcharge adjustments. We also have two additional concerns. Even if the amount of requisite permit holders were met, they have referred the Commission to diesel fuel prices, and they've been clear that 0% of the cabs in their associations are diesel operated. So we would ask that if the Commission were to consider this request, the prices of regular gasoline would be considered.
But the petitioner has already conceded that, correct?
I believe they have.
Okay.
Yes, Chairman. Thank you. And we just wanted to be clear that there's no involvement of diesel fuel here. And third, our concern is that this was a 2005 settlement agreement, and we feel that the loaded miles per day and the gallons of gas used per day are most likely significantly different now than they were in 2005. So we do have some concerns with using this formula at this point, even if the requisite number of permit holders were met. And we would also ask that this request be denied without prejudice.
Thank you. Is the association present? Independent Taxi Cab Association. Jamie, do you know why they're not here today?
I can answer that.
Mr. Gorman, yes. Director Gorman.
Commissioners, good morning. Mark Gorman on behalf of transportation staff. I did reach out to Ms. Howard, who is the president of the association, and I don't know if she was under the impression that OPC's comments were the final say, and I did advise her to attend, and because the commission does have the final say for approval or denial, but I don't know why she's not here. I did reach out to her by email, though. We had a conversation back and forth.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gorman. Any other taxi cab associations in the audience today? We are the Taxi Cab Commission, although we don't often hear from the associations. Recognizing that the cost of fuel and the cost of everything has gone up tremendously over the past 3 or 4 months, I look back and see that taxi cab rates haven't increased since 2008. What is Office of People's Counsel's position on that?
We also note, obviously, that they have not increased since 2008, and we don't think it would be unreasonable to consider this, but we do think that this particular formula is likely outdated. So we just feel that maybe it shouldn't be implemented without a further evaluation and study.
Is OPC working with the taxi cab industry in Baltimore City?
We've had some communication through this case. I personally have not yet been very involved in that since I started, as you know, last year. but we do, they were cooperative in responding to our requests here.
All of your data requests have been responded to.
I did receive requests from Z-Trip yesterday, and there was one request they couldn't answer, and that was the amount of loaded miles. They said they needed more time to calculate that.
Is the position of the office that we should raise taxi cab rates?
We have not yet taken a position on this. We feel that additional evaluation would be necessary.
A lot of time has passed since the rates were last reviewed. Does staff have a position?
I do mirror your concerns with the rates. The rates are from 2008, and I know that besides the fuel costs, they do have operational costs that directly related to the rising costs in general. So it does need to be reevaluated, in my opinion, in our opinion.
Thank you, my colleagues. Commissioner Richard.
Yeah, you actually touched on some of the questions I was going to ask about the process, and it sounds like we have a process that was set up in 2008. But I was kind of surprised that, first of all, we didn't receive any kind of request at all until July. It's my understanding, and tell me if I'm correct, that Uber and Lyft, they both implemented surcharges in late March and April of this year, and Washington D.C. their taxi commission also did so in July. So I guess I was a little surprised that we didn't try to at least hear from the taxi cabs about some kind of relief they might need during when the gas prices were at the highest. So maybe you can help me. Is it just really up to the associations to I guess approach the commission, or do we have any type of regular work groups or proceedings? One is suggested in the filing, but can you help me better understand the process, and if we do have regular contact with the associations?
Commissioner Richard, that's a very good question. It's the process is kind of hazy. When looking back on the history of the rate cases and the fuel surcharges, it's pretty difficult to kind of get a timeline. And being fairly new personnel here in the transportation division, it was our understanding that historically anyone that was requesting rate increases or differences in rates, that it was up to that specific entity, which in this case would have been the associations. I did learn from this buck sheet that it appears that it could be OPC, the taxi cab industry themselves, and or the commission. So I don't have an answer as to why it hasn't occurred yet. We did hear when the fuel prices were getting up there, we did hear some conversations amongst the permit holders and the drivers. It was always under our impression that it had to come from them, and this is where we are today.
Okay, well, thank you for that answer, and I guess we don't have any of the associations here today, but I would just express, as one commissioner, that I would be supportive of hearing from the taxi cabs associations, just like we want to see our utilities strong and providing good service. I feel likewise about the taxi cabs, and so in any case, if there is something we could do to try to facilitate that process, I think, again, you mentioned that there is a work group that meets on a voluntary basis. Perhaps that's a starting point, and perhaps there's a way for OPC to also try to bring people to the table. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple things. A couple of years ago, gasoline prices were almost at a historic lows. We were energy independent with regard to fossil fuels. Could the taxi cab associations been benefiting from the 2008 settlement or the 2008 rates when the gas was at very low prices?
Commissioner O'Donnell, that is a very good question, and yes, I do agree that they could have been. There was, when this all began, I believe in early 2000, when there was a fuel surcharge that was implemented, and I think it was approved for a few different times, and then a rate case came out of that, and then fuel started to drop. So I guess my timeline is a little bit off, but there was a company that did filed to reduce their the fuel surcharge because, or they requested to, because the fuel surcharge was based on a higher per gallon of gas, and that is how they went into the rate case that became the 2008-2009, and then the outcome of that was the current rates. But I do agree that yes, they benefit when the fuel prices are low, and then when they get higher, then they don't benefit as well.
Yeah, as I drove up here this morning, I noted one retailer in Calvert County was selling gasoline for $3.39.9. I never thought $3.39.9 would feel so good, Mr. Chairman, but it was pleasing to the eye, believe it or not. But I don't think we're going to see gasoline prices decrease anytime soon. Not with the current, well, who knows what's going to happen, but let's just say this. My point is that gasoline prices can be as volatile as the chemical compounds that make up gasoline. And they go up and they go down. And I guess my question becomes, who monitors this surcharge for upside benefits or downside undercharges? Who keeps an eye on it? Anybody?
I don't believe so,
Yeah.
Commissioner.
Okay. Well, in as much as they do reference in their filing the U.S. National Average Diesel Fuel Index price, and they don't meet the requisite number of permit holders to file for a surcharge change, as pointed out by the Office of People's Counsel and staff. And anytime we have the Office of People's Counsel and staff in such violent agreement, I support the recommendation, Mr. Chairman. I think it's premature, but they should feel free to come back. Let me ask one last question. Ms. Zeigner asked for further study and evaluation. You alluded to it, Mr. Gorman. Where does that take place? Who's going to do that? How's that going to be done? If it's going to be done, or is it just we're just talking about it here today and we kind of forget about it?
No, I hope that doesn't happen, Mr. Commissioner. I don't know. I think we're going to have to discuss that, and I'll do some research and see what has occurred historically, and talk to some of my staff that have been around a while. And
I hate to say the words, but if we don't have a good idea, we might have to come up with a work group to figure it out.
Yes, sir.
Not that I think we need another work group, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ms. Zeichner, did you state that OPC is conducting a study?
No, Chairman, no. I simply believe that if we were to try to institute this 2005 agreement, we would want additional study first. At this time, we are not currently conducting a study.
Okay. Are you inclined to initiate a study?
We would be interested in working with staff and talking about that. I'd like to talk to the office further, but yes, we would be interested in evaluating this further.
Thank you. I don't see anybody taking the leadership role here, but Commissioner, Mr. Spivak.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner O'Donnell, Commissioners, as one of the few people here that was actually here for the last rate case, the sort of evaluation and information that Ms. Zeichner is talking about is really something that comes out of a rate case. That's really how you go about redoing and resetting the whole thing. As Ms. Zeichner alluded to, the 2008 deal was struck on a very careful balancing of interests, and it was the sort of thing that can only happen when you have all of the data and all of the parties at the table. And generally speaking, that does come in the context of a rate case. Now, I will say there was an attempted rate case, I guess in 2014, around that time frame, and that one did not go very well. Just in terms of getting the information from the industry, it is difficult to. The taxi cab industry is a little different than the utility industry, and it's very difficult to get all the many players in there to provide the information that's needed for really evaluating how good the current rates are. But nonetheless, that would probably be the most appropriate format is in a new rate case.
Well, it doesn't seem like the taxi cab associations are in an agreement that a surcharge is necessary, only having 2 on record, 2 of 13 associations. So it might be up to OPC to bring a rate case because it doesn't look like the taxi cab associations can communicate. Ms. Howard stated that she tried to reach out and calls weren't being returned from other taxi cab associations. So if we collectively want to raise taxi cab rates, it's going to be the responsibility of the folks at both podiums. Commissioner Buber, did you have questions?
Well, I did, but I think they were answered by Mr. Spivak, so thank you. I have some sympathy, as you noted, Mr. Chairman, that, gas prices have gone up, but as you noted, Commissioner O'Donnell, they're going down too. And I'm leaning towards supporting the staff on this just because of the requirements that were in the previous agreement were not met, and we haven't heard from the association, so I don't have any further questions.
One question for Mr. Gorman, perhaps. This entire filing from ITA assumes that the fleet is combustion engine vehicles. Are there any electric vehicle taxis in the city fleet? Because then it'd be hard to sort of tie the national gas price to the surcharge.
I don't know if there are any strictly electric. I know there are hybrids. They do use the Toyota Prius. There are quite a few of them around. They're hybrid vehicles. But I'm not aware of any strictly just electric vehicles that
Okay.
can operate as taxi cabs.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Richard.
I'm finding this an interesting conversation. And it seems that there are. I live closer to Washington D.C. than Baltimore, so I'm very familiar with in the news what they're doing, and it seems like they're doing a lot of innovative things as far as trying to promote electric vehicles and alternative fuel vehicles, and they seem to be more engaged on a regular basis with taxi cab. I guess it's probably more of a statement, but maybe that is something we could talk about a little more internally about. Maybe we look at how some of our neighboring regions regulate their taxi cabs. Whether it's Washington D.C. or Philadelphia, New York, and places that are doing some interesting things with their taxi cab fleets to see if maybe we can help elevate Baltimore to that level. So anyway, just it's more of a thought for you as transportation director to consider. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Seeing no additional questions, I would move that we deny the request without prejudice to implement a temporary fuel surcharge. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, item number 5 is the 2022 to 2023 report on the procurement improvement process from the Office of Staff Counsel.
I would invite any of the parties who wish to get comfortable. Otherwise, you could take a podium. We have Montgomery County, we have People's Council, we have PEPCO. I believe we have Potomac Edison. We only have 4 seats, so only take 1 if you're representing. Okay, and if everybody could remember to just enter an appearance. We have no buck sheet on this item, so we'll turn it over to Mr. Spivak.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak for the Commission staff. We do not have a buck sheet, but we do have a report, which basically outlines the various proposals that were considered in this year's annual procurement and improvement process. As you are aware, this year's process was a bit more a bit longer and dealt with more complicated issues than usual. Specifically, we were dealing with trying to address the Montgomery County Community Choice Aggregation Pilot Program that's due to start sometime in the next couple of years. And in order to do so, we asked for a temporary fix back in February with respect to Potomac Edison and indicated that we would start the annual procurement improvement process earlier in April, and in fact that is what we did, and we met several times, generally considerably more than we normally do in these processes, but we were not able to arrive at a complete consensus. So just to start with, going through the report, the changes that are memorialized in the documents that were filed with the report, which include the this year's version of the model RFP for bidding and the model full service requirements agreement known as the FSA. So we have those documents, and those generally memorialize the proposed changes. The first is simply the changes to the schedule of bidding for each year, and that's really just the calendar for bidding that we do every year, and it's altered each year to suit the schedule that we need for that year. The second change is just, or lack of change really, is continued use of a proxy price for capacity within the bidding. Again, normally the capacity price would be incorporated fully within the bids at the level at which PJM establishes it, but for the last few years, PJM has not been able to fully establish the capacity price within the time frames that we need. So we have been using a proxy price for those, and we're asking to continue to do so. The third item is elimination of something called contingency bidding. And basically, this was a mechanism that was incorporated quite a few years ago into the Maryland SOS bidding, which enabled bidders to condition their acceptance of Type 2 bids on how much residential and Type 1 load that they obtained or that they won the bidding for. Nobody has ever actually used it, although one party at the time was very interested in trying that mechanism. But it seems even they didn't use it. So at this point, we're just saying, let's eliminate it and simplify things a little bit. So that change has been made in the paragraphs that specifically deal with that. That's section 4.7 of the RFP and the appendix 12, as well as in other sections where contingency bidding is referenced. Fourth, there was the issue of the carve-out for ORECs, really in this past legislative session, the General Assembly. Basically passed legislation that would make OREC charges a non-bypassable surcharge. So that the documents here kind of memorialize that as well, specifically in Exhibit B of the FSA. There are also a few non-consensus proposals. It doesn't appear to me that any of them have been further pursued by the parties that made them with respect to the provision of additional load data, an increased unsecured credit cap, and an increased unsecured credit cap. That brings us to the big issue of the day, which remains as it was, the Montgomery County Community Choice Aggregation Pilot. Essentially, we were not able to agree completely on how to adjust the SOS bidding for that pilot, so we have presented the Commission with a few options that the various parties presented during the PIP meetings. The first was simply a geographic split, and it was apparent fairly early on that the utilities did not think they would be able to implement that split for this year's bidding. So that was essentially ruled out by the parties. That left us with two additional options, one of which is essentially doing nothing but establishing that the CCA could not begin power flow prior to June 1st of 2025. And the second option, referred to actually as option 2 in the staff report, is to present contracts to bidders that are modified in it by time. That is, instead of doing strictly 2-year contracts, PEPCO would be doing 16-month and 8-month contracts to adjust for the change in load that might occur on October 1st, 2024. And PE would be doing 16-month and 4-month 12-month and 4-month contracts, I believe, but they're here and they can correct me if they want to. So those are the two main options. The parties other than staff that have commented are the Office of People's Counsel, PEPCO, and Montgomery County. They have brought to the Commission's attention an ongoing conflict within the working group that is addressing the CCA more directly than the procurement improvement process. I believe that's PC 54. And that conflict has to do with the interpretation of whether of the provisions regarding what the Commission actually has to pre-approve for the CCA, and in particular whether the Commission has to approve the rates. I don't think either OPC or Montgomery County is actually asking the Commission to resolve that issue today. They seem to be asking for it to do so in fairly soon. However, staff's preference is for that issue to be dealt with as part of the whole of the issue of the CCA when the CCA work group brings its report forward and brings that issue with it. I understand that that's also the preference of the PULJ leading that work group. However, if the Commission is inclined to address that particular issue sooner and separately, then we would certainly urge you to provide all of the interested stakeholders an opportunity to either brief the issue or do oral arguments, since the issue is essentially a matter of statutory interpretation.
Thank you, Mr. Spivak. I do recognize we have overlapping constituencies here because the CCA docket, as well as this PIP item, might not capture everybody in the room today. It captures some, but not all. Thank you for the very thorough summary. Going forward, subsequent speakers, if you agree with the consensus items, we don't need to discuss that. We can focus on the non-consensus items that Mr. Spivak raised towards the end. We'll next go to Ms. Brennan, Montgomery County. You could pull that down if you'd like.
Can I? She said.
Oh,
there we go. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Lisa Brennan, Associate County Attorney for Montgomery County, Maryland. With me today is Stan Edwards, Chief of the Energy, Climate, and Compliance Division of Montgomery County's Department of Environmental Protection, and Michael Krautheimer, Managing Director for EV Advisors. Montgomery County appreciates the opportunity to be here today, and I'll just summarize a few of the points that we made in our comments. I appreciate Mr. Spivak's summary, and he is correct. We are not asking for a decision today on the issue that has been raised. The county filed comments on the PIP report because it raises specific issues related to the Montgomery County Community Choice Aggregation Program and its impact on SOS procurements. The PIP report references substantial uncertainty as to when or even if the CCA will start, which we briefly explained and have suggested a path forward for the Commission to resolve this uncertainty. Based on the county's interpretation of the statute, we believe it's not only possible, but we are committed to serving 100% of the county's load starting October 1st, 2024. We voluntarily agreed to not start assuming load before that date to allow time for this PIP process to occur. This issue is not premature, as evidenced by the discussion in the PIP report. The issues being discussed in the PC54 Community Choice Workgroup have a direct relationship with this PIP report and the upcoming SOS procurements. Contrary to staff's reply, the county is not trying to do an end run around the workgroup process, but rather trying to suggest a way to resolve the impasse to the benefit of both workgroups. The county asked the Commission to place this issue on an upcoming administrative meeting agenda to allow stakeholders, including from the Community Choice Workgroup, who might not be participating in today's proceeding, to comment on the issue for the Commission's consideration. If needed, Montgomery County is prepared to file a more formal request for guidance to assist in that process if the Commission so wishes. To address the specific options regarding the SOS auctions, the county supports staff's recommendation described as option 2 for Pepco and PE. We believe those would, as referenced, mitigate possible risks. But we believe the risk is primarily the start date at this point. We do not support option 3, which would prevent the county from starting its CCA as anticipated, and would also require dealing with the issue again before the April 2023 procurement. So it doesn't actually buy the commission a year or a significant amount of time. With that, I will say we are certainly available for any commissioners' questions.
Thank you, Ms. Brennan. We'll next hear from Office of People's Counsel.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners. Nikki Wiggins from the Office of People's Counsel. As we noted in our filed comments, OPC is recommending that the Commission only adopt the alternate bid plans filed by Pepco and Potomac Edison if the Commission is satisfied that those plans won't materially increase price volatility for SOS service. As we noted in our filed comments and as staff referenced, procurement shouldn't be based on this time on a geographic split between Montgomery County and Prince George's, simply because utilities can't provide the data. But if we're looking at option 2, what staff called option 2, based on a temporal split in contracts, where no contracts extend past the anticipated start date of the CCA on October 1st, 2024, Pepco and Potomac Edison both submitted alternate bid plans based on that option, but those bid plans are significantly different based on base procurement plans for those two companies. As we noted in our comments, we do not think that the plan submitted by Pepco would create a material change in procurement that would be adverse to SOS customers, but we do think that Potomac Edison's alternative bid plan, which is much more extensively changed from their base bid plan, would create an unnecessary or insurmountable amount of risk in order to adopt those plans. We noted that Potomac Edison's bid plans would contemplate a period in time, summer 2024, in which 50% of their total SOS load is procured with 4-month contracts. Those 4-month contracts, we didn't, in the work group, talk to suppliers about whether those products would be attractive, especially with the lead times that they would need to procure those contracts. So we don't know if there would be, attracting competitive offers at that point. We're losing kind of the spread of time that would smooth price volatility with a 4-month contract. We feel like the risk that SOS prices would be too volatile under that plan is too high for the Commission to accept that alternate plan. Instead, we would request that the Commission use its scheduling authority under the PUA 7-501.3L to delay the earliest start date of the CCA for PE customers only to June 1st, 2025. The statute enables the Commission to set a schedule after the start date of the CCA is established to move SOS load over to the CCA in the interest of SOS price stability and risk mitigation. In this case, because the risks of Potomac Edison's alternate schedule are so high, we would ask that the Commission delay that load being moved over to the CCA at least. That gives Potomac Edison a little bit more time to look at the CCA plans once they're filed by Montgomery County, if that were to take place. So thank you, and I'm here for questions.
Thank you. We'll turn to counsel for PHI.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Taylor Beckham here on behalf of Pepco Holdings. Our comments were specifically to provide the Commission with additional context. We support, or we prefer, option 3 for the purpose of the uncertainty which both staff in its report, as well as Montgomery County, as well as OPC, have noted as far as the statutory interpretation of whether or not the Commission can approve rates. That is a key issue that we do think the Commission needs to resolve in the near future, because certainty as to the CCA is really important, especially as to the start date. Option 3 mitigates that risk a little bit more, in our opinion, because if the county commits to a start date of June 1, 2025, then there will be more time for the utilities to plan and for there to be certainty as to the CCA starting. Pepco is not opposed to option 2, only if there's a commitment to start on October 1, 2024. The reason is if the CCA is unable to serve the load on October 1, 2024, and in this bid, Pepco hasn't procured load for Montgomery County, there would be a need to purchase load at spot prices, which are really volatile. So trying to mitigate that concern, that's why we would prefer option 3. But if there's a commitment to start on October 1, 2024, that is a mitigated risk. Option 2, though, is not without risk because with the way that the contracts are set up, 16-month and an 8-month stub period, there is still some risk as to how much load would be procured in Montgomery County because we don't know. We don't know who's going to switch back to SOS, and there's just a level of risk there. But that's the purpose of Pepco's comments. I'm joined today by Dan Tudor, our Manager of Energy Acquisition, and we are available for questions whenever the Commission's ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beckham. Counsel for Potomac Edison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Jeffrey Trout for Potomac Edison. I want to begin by saying that everyone in both work groups have worked very, very hard and with creativity and good faith to try to resolve all of the issues that arise from the need to develop a seam between the SOS service and the future CCA service. And from my perspective at least, nobody here is incorrect. Everybody's bringing you the best information that they have and the best plans that they have. And you are faced with a difficult decision, and that is because the CCA statute has two different goals, and there's a natural conflict between those two goals. One goal is to launch as early as reasonably possible and as successfully as reasonably possible this experiment, the CCA. The other goal is, while that is happening, to protect to the maximum extent possible all the customers, both in Montgomery County but especially in the other jurisdictions, who remain on standard offer service. So you have tension between those goals. You have multiple ways to try to address the issue. And there is, sadly, there's no silver bullet. You're going to have to choose, I believe, between the best options that have been brought to you, all of which have advantages and disadvantages. Potomac Edison's position in this is simple in words, although complicated in practice. On the one hand, we are committed to facilitating a transition beginning October 1 of 2024. We committed to that in the arrangements that were made to cover this bid year. We've stood by that commitment in the CCA work group, and we stand by it today. So what we have brought you as one of our two bid plans, what staff is calling option 2, will facilitate that. But the Office of People's Counsel is clearly correct in pointing out, as we through the staff's report also pointed out, that does increase the risk to SOS customers, that option 2. Option 3, which would have a sharp break at June of 2025, would perforce delay the possible start date of the CCA, and that is not a minor thing to have to choose. And we are not standing here trying to force the Commission to do that. That's why we brought you two options. That said, clearly from our perspective, with respect to the customers of Potomac Edison who stay on SOS, option 3 is the less risky alternative. And that's the best we're going to be able to do, commissioners. And I'll end by adding my voice to those who believe that the issue of rate oversight and, to a certain extent, the mechanics of what rate approval the commission is going to assert over the CCA and how it would do that. Resolving that sooner rather than later, before we get to the point of no return on the standard offer service contracts, may be how this problem gets solved, but it is unfortunately not something that you can do as you sit there today.
Thank you, Mr. Troutman, for your balanced advocacy. While we have you here, all the other parties have thrown in their lot and cast their vote with respect to that jurisdictional issue, and we'll address that in a minute. Obviously, Montgomery County and OPC state that the commission don't have jurisdiction. PHI and staff say we do. What say you?
I don't want to sound like I'm trying to split the baby, but I think it's more complicated than a do or a don't. I believe that there are certain aspects of what the CCA could charge the non-power supply price parts that the statute clearly identifies the commission having jurisdiction over and having to pass on. But that isn't going to impact the SOS bidding or the power supply procurement by the CCA. So the issue is, does the commission have jurisdiction over, does the commission have to issue an order that says that the rates resulting from the power supply procurement for the CCA are just and reasonable? And here again, I think you can draw a division, because the CCA has explained to us, or the county has explained to us in the CCA work group, that they contemplate offering multiple products through the CCA. I'm going to let them amplify or correct me if I get this wrong, but there are going to be green alternatives procured in a variety of different ways, and then there's going to be at least one plain vanilla alternative. And if the way the CCA is structured, that you have this range of possible products offered by the CCA, only one of which is what customers default into, the plain vanilla one, then with respect to all the other alternatives, those should, and I believe the law is written in such a way that the commission can not have to pass on those prices. In that respect, the CCA will be clearly functioning as a garden variety retail supplier, because a customer would have to affirmatively opt into any of the alternatives. So again, the issue gets narrowed down to, what do you do with the power supply price for the plain vanilla, this is what you get defaulted into if you don't choose anything else, product that is the most similar to what SOS does. And there, again, I don't think you have to go to either of the extremes that the other parties are advocating, because you don't do that with respect to SOS. You very sharply regulate the structure of the process. You have a bid monitor who oversees the actual bidding, and then you have a hearing where the bid monitor comes in and explains to you, yes, everybody followed the rules, and oh, by the way, yes, the outcome is within the realm of reason. But the order that you issue on a Thursday afternoon or a Friday morning with respect to the SRS procurement is not an order that says therefore these are just and reasonable rates. It's an order that says there's a set process that has been approved for decades and has been followed, and we sanity checked it, and there was no deviation from the process, and the bid monitor said that the results were within the realm you would expect from the marketplace. That kind of review is not not what I understand staff to be saying. They're seeking to do. What I understand staff to be saying is they're seeking a ruling of just and reasonable rates. And I understand the county to be saying, no, you can't. Because we are not a regulated utility. You can't issue an order that requires us to prove they're just and reasonable rates. Well, you already have a mechanism where you do something that is neither of those things, but ensures a reasonable outcome. If you copy, with appropriate modifications, the approval process that you use today and have been using for the better part of 2 decades to ensure reasonable outcomes for SOS, and you apply that to that one product, the plain vanilla default offering by the CCA, I think you can arrive at a mechanism that will work for the CCA but protect the public interest. That's my 2 cents on the subject.
That was more like 25 cents. Thank you, Mr. Trout. Not a yes or no. Councilor McGee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. James McGee with the Law Office of Robert Castro on behalf of Prince George's County. Thank you for letting me speak this morning. The county did not file any written comments, but I do have some oral comments to relay. Obviously, the county is concerned of its citizens, its residents, and also the small businesses that would be subject to the Type 1 SOS procurement. The county defers to the commission as to which option 2, as described by staff, which would be the 16-month and then the 8-month contract, or option 3, which is that the CCA cannot begin until June of 2025. We do have one caveat as to option 2. So a little bit of a background as to the 16-month and the 8-month. The reason for that is after the 16 months, that's when the 2 counties would be separated, so to speak. So the first 16 months of that contract for PEPCO would be serving both Montgomery County and Prince George's County load. After those 16 months, that 8-month period would just be Prince George's County, with some Montgomery County coming back, maybe Prince George's County residents that were with retail suppliers coming back. So our caveat to that is whether it's an 8-month contract that's bid out 6 months from now, or maybe that 8-month contract gets merged into a 24-month contract. We don't know the answer to that yet. We definitely support having the 16-month contract be bid out in both counties for PEPCO this October, but are up for discussion as to the timing of that stub 8-month contract. And finally, we do concur with most parties that we believe that the issue is ripe for the commission to decide as to the statutory interpretation of your ability to decide the rates. We don't have a position on that one way or the other, but do think it's something appropriate for you to decide.
Thank you, Mr. McGee.
Thank you.
Any other parties wishing to be heard? Mr. McGee, everything I've heard and read in the pleadings so far yields that Prince Georgians will probably be the most protected as opposed to Montgomery County or other jurisdictions. That was the one silver lining amongst all of the parties. Rebuttal, Ms. Brennan.
There were some issues raised regarding risks, and I'd like to turn this over. Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. There were some issues raised regarding risk, and I'd like to refer that over to Mr. Krautheimer.
Okay, a risk regarding what?
Risk regarding the procurement process and what might the results be.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Krautheimer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'd be happy to go point by point because there were numerous allegations of risk and volatility associated with the proposed timelines and implementation of the CCA on October 1st, 2024.
And if you could let us know who you're responding to.
There were statements about that in OPC's written remarks as well as PHI's. So we'd be happy to go through those. because they were in the written materials as well as restated this morning, although based on your question just before I stood up about perhaps it wasn't as amplified as we took it to be, because we're very sensitive to suggestions that anything we're doing would put customers either within Montgomery County or anywhere else in Maryland at risk, because we certainly have no intention to that. So we can answer any questions you may have about risk or volatility, because we don't believe that those are accurate. But while we're up here, I also do want to thank Mr. Trout, because he articulated many of these issues extremely accurately, and we agree with the vast majority of his statements on the matter, particularly with the collaboration of the entire work group, but also as to the substance. I also want to clarify that it's not that Montgomery County does not believe that the Commission possesses jurisdiction over the CCA. We certainly agree that the Commission does have jurisdiction over the CCA in many regards. The statute is extremely clear in the elements of the aggregation plan that must be included, that we must prepare. We must provide a lot of detail about matters such as governance, oversight, budget, checks and balances, customer protections, different types of rates, frequency with which we communicate information to customers, ultimately a termination plan, if that would ever come to pass. So there's a lot of information that's going to be contained in the aggregation plan, and that plan is subject to review and approval by you. So you absolutely do have an obligation under the statute to review the plan and ensure that it meets with the statutory requirements. With regard to procurements, as Mr. Trout described, the procurement plan will also be an important element of the overall aggregation plan. The document will be called the aggregation plan. We will, within that document, describe in great detail the means with which the designated entity will procure power for participating residents. And we do not believe that there is a distinction between what we may offer as a, quote, default rate as opposed to other optional rates. A decision has not been made yet as to what the base rate will be, what the options will be, when the options may become available to customers. There are some open questions that are being discussed within the county's executives right now. But there is no difference when it comes to the Commission's oversight of one rate or one product versus another. The details of all of the products will be described in great detail. The manner in which we go to market, is design an RFP, solicit bids, review the bids, will all be described in great detail within the aggregation plan. The Commission is within its right to ensure that the county is carrying out the plan as it commits to when it files the plan, but there should be no different level of scrutiny with regard to one product or another. The Commission is not leaving SOS behind. SOS will remain as a backstop to the CCA. Customers will be able to opt out of the CCA and go into SOS. SOS was always intended to be a transitional mechanism. It's been a 20-year transition. Montgomery County now has been granted the authority by the General Assembly to bring a new entrant into the market, and that's the CCA. And it is not a traditional retail supplier, nor is it SOS. It is a new offering to customers, and it's a part of the county's climate action plan. It is an integral vehicle through which the county seeks to achieve its myriad energy goals.
We understand that, Mr. Krauthammer.
Well, I will leave it at that. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll start with a few questions and then turn it over to my colleagues. With respect to this jurisdictional dispute, I think Ms. Brennan characterized it as an impasse, although all the parties appear today to state that the Commission does not need to address or resolve this issue on the spot. I see we have Judge Grace, the work group leader, in the room, and I want to thank her. This has no doubt been a challenging work group to lead. Staff is requesting that this be addressed with the full audience, all the work group members, many of which are not here today, and I'm inclined to support that request. I think Mr. Trout articulated that this is a little more difficult than what either one side or another is articulating here. So I'll look forward to my colleagues if they have questions. But since the parties seem to be in agreement that the Commission here and now today does not need to resolve this, I would hope that the parties continue to work with Judge Grace, and to the extent that this impasse cannot be resolved with some additional time, Judge Grace will have the option at her discretion to bring this issue to the Commission for resolution. The second big issue is the bid scheduling, and we've heard of questions of risk. Mr. Krautheimer just said that there's not a tremendous amount of risk. Ms. Wiggins wants to push back the schedule for at least Potomac Edison. Ms. Brennan, where are you on that request that it be pushed back to June 1st, 2025 for Potomac Edison customers?
So first of all, let me say that we believe that, we would be ready to serve 100% of the customers on October 1st, 2024, assuming these issues get worked.
We, Montgomery County?
The county. There's also a practical benefit of starting everybody at the same time. From an advertising perspective, it will be difficult to explain to the people in PE territory why they don't have the same options for several months. So we believe it would be beneficial for the county to start load for 100% of its customers. Obviously, there will be a limit to how many customers can do it per day, just from a logistical standpoint. But roughly the same time, we believe that there's some benefits to that.
Right, yeah, for folks living in Germantown who are PE customers and who are Pepco customers. Ms. Wiggins, how do you respond to that, the county attempting to market this and explain, and you have some starting on October 4th or 1st and some on June 1st?
We can appreciate how that might be awkward to communicate, but it's not impossible. And I don't think it's actually particularly difficult. I mean, if the work group has some time to work out marketing and communication. In this case, we're talking about not just Potomac Edison's customers within Montgomery County. We're talking about their full SOS load that this is going to impact. So we're not talking about just Montgomery County customers. They're going to have to bear possibly additional risk from these 4-month contracts.
What other customers would bear risk? Prince Georgians would not.
Well,
I think she would be referring to the customers in the other portions of PE's service territory. That is Frederick County, Washington County, Allegheny, and Garrett, because the contracts would apply to all, that PE procures would apply to all customers.
Is that your response?
That's correct, yes.
And you're saying that right now you don't have enough information to determine whether or the severity or degree of risk?
That's correct. And this was, Potomac Edison kind of presented this procurement alternate plan late. We didn't really have a robust discussion with even the suppliers for them to tell us their thoughts on a 4-month contract product, whether they would be interested in bidding on something like that. But considering that it's vastly different from what Potomac Edison is doing now, and that system is designed to try to smooth price volatility over time when suppliers are bidding on these contracts. And
but
so,
for the right price, whether it be a 4-month, 6-month, 8-month contract, the supplier will presumably bid.
presumably, we would presume that they would, but we're not entirely certain how, if a competitive atmosphere would exist, if enough suppliers would express interest.
Mr. Trout.
So, two things. One is the discussions, the other is the level of risk. We had discussed all along in the SOS PIP work group the possibility, several possible contract durations, including these possibilities. But what drew most of the attention and most of the discussion, and understandably so, in the work group was the dilemma faced by PEPCO as opposed to Potomac Edison. Half of PEPCO's customers are directly impacted because they're in Montgomery County, whereas we only have 15% of our SOS customers, or less than 15% of our SOS customers in Montgomery County. That said, Mr. Spivak is exactly right that what we do for those customers is going to be the same thing that we do for all the rest of our customers. So all the rest of our customers, the other 85+%, will be impacted. So that's the discussion history from my perspective. With respect to the risk, we could convene another session or two of the PIP work group and ask the suppliers, well, would you bid in early 2024 on a 4-month contract, or late 2023 on a 4-month contract for Potomac Edison, and we'd get a lot of shrugs, and statements like it would depend on the market conditions at the time and the projections going forward. And if we ask the further question, what would be the risk premium you would impute, given that this is the bidding is always different on short-term contracts than on long-term contracts, and it can be higher. You've seen this with the Type 2 contracts. Sometimes they're a lot higher than the 12 and 24-month contracts, and sometimes they're a lot lower. You've seen that in the SOS, and what the suppliers will tell us. My best estimate, based on doing this for 20 years, is that it will depend on market conditions at the time, Mr. Trout, and thank you very much for asking. So we're not going to learn a lot more over the next few weeks or even the next few months than what we know now. What we do know is that there's a substantially greater volatility risk associated with a short-term contract than there is with a longer-term contract. And again, we know that from having done this for nigh on 20 years. And so option 3 is inconsistent with launching all of the CCA as early as October 1 of 2024. Option 3 also reduces the volatility risk to the customers for whom you go with option 3. And if we're talking about just Potomac Edison, it definitely reduces the volatility risk for the customers of Potomac Edison. That said, as I opened my remarks earlier, Potomac Edison stands here willing and able to do either of those options at your direction.
Thank you, Mr. Trout. Obviously, the further we extend this out to 2030, we'll have a little less risk here. Counselor, did you wish to make an appearance?
Yeah. I'm Dan Tudor with Manager Energy Acquisition with PHI. I just wanted to talk briefly about the risk with option 2. Again, we can support option 2 if there's a date certain.
Right, that's what Ms. Beckham said.
So we can do the 16 and 8. The issue is for that 8-month contract, we're not going to be purchasing supply for Montgomery County customers. So if the CCA is delayed past that date, all of those customers will have to either be purchased on spot prices, or we'll have to have a procurement prior to that.
Right. That is a risk of exposure, and Montgomery County is fully aware of that, correct?
We are aware of that, and the idea that the county would, on the evening of September 30th, for the first time, announce to the world that we're not going to be delivering power on October 1st, thus resulting in spot purchases, is not going to happen. I'm firmly confident in saying we're not going to be relying on spot purchases on the day of delivery.
It won't be on the eve of, but what if it's 2 months earlier? I think Miss Wiggins here would be quite concerned if it's 2 months trying to find a short term.
Not necessarily. I mean, the trend now is towards smaller procurements. They're less risky than larger, longer term procurements. It will be different, but it will not but it is not risky. It may be higher, it may be lower. There's no way to know today what it will be.
When you say risk, are you equating that to a value of KWH?
Risk. You ask an excellent question. That's actually the question we've been wondering ourselves as the term risk is bandied about a lot this morning.
What about the money, the rates? Ms. Wiggins, your risk. What is your risk?
Risk of price volatility.
Price. You just care about prices.
Correct.
But there's, as we've heard from a few other witnesses today, there's not risk of a higher price. There's a possibility of a different price, but that price could just as easily be lower or higher. That is not risk. That's just a different option.
Ms. Wiggins, are you worried about the risk of prices going lower?
No.
Okay. Counsel, if you could please identify yourself.
Actually, I'm not counsel. I'm a representative for Potomac Edison. My name is Bob Reaping. I'm manager of regulated commodity sourcing. The only point I wanted to make to the Montgomery County representative when he said that they're not going to wait till September 30th and then decide not to do it. While I believe they have a good faith that they are going to continue with their plans and that they definitely want to move forward, we have to recognize as part of the SOS process, we don't want to break what has worked well for our customers to date. I'll give you a corollary example. There's an example in Ohio currently going on where a community choice aggregator has decided to turn back over 500,000 customers immediately. They're just stopping their program. So
what happens there?
Well, unless later this afternoon, because I understand it will be addressed by the commission due to a complaint by an SSO. They call their product SSO. We call it SOS here in Maryland. Due to a complaint by one of the SSO suppliers asking for a cease and desist order. If that is not granted by the commission, all over 500,000 customers will immediately come back to the default service program, SSO, and the customer or the suppliers are going to be responsible for picking up 500,000 customers as soon as the meter redates are associated with bringing those customers back. When you talk about volatility and risk to the product, we also have procurements coming up in October, in January, and throughout next year. It can have a significant impact on the standard service product. So when we look at this, when we're trying to balance what's going on in PC 54, what's going on here, we need to make sure that we don't break the product so that it's not viable for any customer, Montgomery customer or any other customer that we serve. So that's the balance that we're trying to maintain. And all I'm saying is, like I said, I understand the county is fully committed to moving forward. But as you've heard today, there are many, many issues that still need to be addressed. And that's why the utilities, as part of the PIP report, have provided several different options to look at. One, including wait until June 1 of 2025 to give more time so that all those issues can be addressed and we can create a transition product that protects the customers as well as the bidders and provides value to the county as part of their program.
Thank you. I just have one more question for Ms. Wiggins, and then I'll turn to my colleagues. Ms. Wiggins, this CCA approach has been blessed for the county by the General Assembly. We have a date that we're moving towards, October 1st, 2024. And in your filing, you note that rates might not go down. I think you added some emphasis there. There could be risk of prices going up. Mr. Krauthammer says prices might go down and the customers may save. But But with a deadline on the horizon and the full recognition of the legislature that this may not result in a cost savings, rates may go up as you recognize in your pleading. Why should not the commission move forward, particularly, let's say, with Potomac Edison, October 1st, 2024, and not move to June? You seem to say the further we push this out, at least for PE, there's the potential for less risk. Should we care, is my question. We're implementing a law here.
Yes, I think, regardless of, the legislative intent or the legislative action here, the commission should always be concerned with, all customers that are paying for SOS, including those in Montgomery County and those that would be impacted by the CCA outside of Montgomery County. So I think that it is incumbent on all of us to make sure that we reduce the risk for all those customers as much as possible to the extent that it's reasonable. And by that I mean we want to insulate, Prince George's County and other counties from bearing the risk of the CCA. And so we have to design our SOS procurement schedule with that in mind. But we also want to protect those Montgomery County residents, who are at this point kind of captive to the process from any risks of, a compressed schedule at, later if the CCA fails to go through. We have to keep that in mind as well until Montgomery County has taken this over and those customers have the option of opting out and moving back into SOS and they choose not to exercise that option, at which point it makes sense for them to bear some more of that risk. So yes, I think that we all have to be considerate of the risk for all customers at this point and design this process with that in mind.
Mr. Chairman, may I add something?
Yeah, quickly. I've not been generous to my colleagues, and I know they have many questions. So if you could respond briefly, and we'll turn to colleagues.
The reason you should care is because the statute tells you to. The statute, as I said earlier, gives you two goals. One is to launch the CCA as in the best way possible, but the other is to protect SOS. There's explicit language in the statute about protecting SOS. So you're caught between two conflicting statutory goals.
Thank you. We'll start with Commissioner Bubar.
Thank you. This is fascinating, incredibly complex. Knew it was, but and just really appreciate everybody's positions and opinions on this. So I'm trying to sort out if we can make a decision today on the options for the performance improvement process, and defer the decision on the statutory question. What kind of risk might we be assuming on behalf of the customers? Because I would very much like to proceed with making a decision today on the options that were presented, but after listening to it, I'm wondering if we should defer to the work group to have more discussions, and I'm not sure which work group, PC54 or in the CCA, to have more discussions so that the utilities and others who have not had a chance to weigh in could weigh in.
If I might take a stab at answering that, Commissioner Bubar. I think you really do need to make a decision with respect to the options for SOS, because the next bid for SOS would be scheduled for mid-October, and that really kind of needs to go ahead on schedule if we're to essentially maintain any semblance of normalcy within the process, which we very much would want to do. And that again goes back to the original structure that the Commission set up to mitigate the various risks associated with long-term power purchase contracts, and how do you best supply a standard offer service default power to customers. And so the Commission set up a very carefully balanced process way back in the early 2000s, and it's generally worked very well for us. And what we're doing today is something that happens every year, and has happened every year for basically the last 2 decades. And we want to minimize the disruption to that process, and that kind of keeps everybody involved happier and less. And by that, I'm really referring to the suppliers. I mean, the process was set up to be very transparent, to have the same rules that apply to everybody, to be very predictable, and all of those things kind of minimize the risks that suppliers feel when they participate in the bidding process, and that helps us all out.
Thank you. That's actually very helpful. I don't want to stand in the way of Montgomery County's goals of October 1st, 2024, and with Ms. Brennan's commitment that is where the county is willing to commit, that that is the date that you feel like you can proceed. I wonder, there's maybe some risk with that statement, because I know there's still a lot of things that have to get sorted out to be able to meet that date, but I guess I'm leaning towards kind of supporting that so that we can not stand in the way of Montgomery County proceeding, and knowing that they have the support to meet the goals of what was in the General Assembly.
We certainly appreciate you saying that. That's one of the reasons why we think that it's imperative that we get a resolution to the issue of this oversight of the commission, the approval of the actual rates for the CCA from the commission. We understand, and I think it was mentioned before, that both work groups have worked, we believe, with good faith, and there are just two interpretations. I don't know how much different more time will. I don't think a different result will necessarily come from more time. So we believe that this is an impasse. We would ask that if would we be allowed to file a request specifically to get your guidance, a more formal request? Is that preferable? We're worried that if we wait until the work group report comes out, we believe it's supposed to be filed sometime in January. Depending on how long the commission process takes to review that.
Ms. Brennan, I could interrupt, and we'll have Judge Grace then come up and respond then.
Okay. Sure.
Proceed, yeah.
Sorry. I just, our concern is that that's then pushing into the April 2023 procurements. We believe that this is ripe for discussion. Yes, we certainly weren't asking you to resolve that issue today without the other stakeholders have an opportunity to chime in, but we would ask that it be on an admin meeting agenda, in the very near future. I think there's not consensus, but there is significant support for that idea.
Thank you. I was actually going to ask if Judge Grace could come up, so.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Jennifer Grace. I was tasked with leading the PC 54 work group.
I was just wondering if you had anything to add in terms of what Ms. Brennan had noted, that if we stick with, kind of the January, which I don't know if you would agree with the January timeframe as being when you would expect to submit something to the commission. Do you support that or not support that?
So the statute for the CCA allows the county to apply with the commission to be an aggregator on December 31st of 2024. All right, of 2023. And then the statute provides that at least 60 days prior to that, Montgomery County should come up with their plan, their aggregation plan, and should notify the commission of what's to come. In order to make that happen, the work group has to draft regs, and our schedule for drafting the regs and getting the full report to the commission is the very beginning of January. We're hoping that at that time, very closely, like a week following that, the parties will know it's coming. They can file comments, and that the commission can hear it before the end of January. Some of the parties asked me to bring this issue to the commission piecemeal, and I declined. The reason why I did that is because this is not a simple issue. It's not simple statutory interpretation. This issue comes up throughout all of the decisions we're making in the work group. And it may be that we come to the commission in January with more than one set of regs to consider, or more than one plan to consider. But it's not simply does the commission have jurisdiction or does it not have jurisdiction. Some of the folks, we've been working very hard in the work group. Some of the folks think that the commission jurisdiction extends to the plan only, and that so long as the plan complies with the handful of specific subject requirements that are in the statute, that the commission has to say yes, the plan's fine, and that Montgomery County can do whatever they want with regards to this program. Some folks in the work group believe that the commission should take a look at the plan, but then in addition, take a look at the bids, take a look at the prices, and approve everything, even if the Montgomery County wants to change its offerings or wants to have multiple offerings. There are so many options in between those two ends that the commission can rule on. And there's so many other parts of this program that are affected by that decision and by those decisions that I believe that bringing this to the commission piecemeal would not give the commission adequate information to make a good decision.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and really do want to support the work group process. I know you have been working so hard. Everybody's been working so hard, so I appreciate that. I do feel like I would benefit from better information from what Ms. Brennan said, that if we do wait till that time frame and support the work group coming forward, does that affect the next procurement, or how does that affect the next procurement? That delay. And I don't know who can answer that question, but I'm just wondering, are we creating more risk in the future?
I actually don't think so, provided the commission establishes a schedule today or shortly after today that covers us through April and June of next year, 2023. I think once that course is set, we're mostly set, unless something really comes up in the PC54 work group that throws a real monkey wrench into things. And in that case, we would, as we have in the past on occasion, come to the commission and bring that issue with as much dispatch as possible to get a resolution in time to deal with the April 2023. Now, clearly, we would prefer not to have to do that, and I don't think we will, but that option is always available if we need it.
May I provide a reply to that?
Yes.
Thank you. So the statute says that beginning December 31st, 2023, a county may form a community choice aggregator. We are using that as basically the date by which we would like to be ready to pull the trigger, as it were, on that process. That's not the beginning of the process. That's when the CCA can be an independent entity. We have submitted a timeline, a tentative timeline to the work group. We were hoping to file the aggregation plan in the spring. We need as much lead time as possible to set up our processes to be ready to go on, well, not December 31st, January 1st, 2024, essentially. So regardless of whether the power starts flowing in October, not till October 2024, there's a lot that has to happen between those 2 points. So respectfully, we disagree that putting this off until a work group report is filed in January, and then whatever process, however long it takes for this, for a proceeding to happen to consider comments and review it, that's going to be a delay for the for community choice aggregation. That is going to result in a delay. And I would also say, and it's been alluded to, but I just want to make it clear, one of the things that this difference, this issue is causing, this bifurcation, is you're going to end up, I think, with a lot of things in the report that are non-consensus items. There's going to be sort of 2 tracks. If the commission does X, if the commission does Y. And I think it's just going to add to the confusion at some point. So.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any further questions right now, but I reserve the right to have another round of questions.
I'll turn to Commissioner O'Donnell next, but one question, Miss Brennan. Whether or not we, as a commission, determine to exercise jurisdiction, how does that change the plan that you'd be filing in the spring? And what is the sense of urgency that the commission must resolve this impasse today, as opposed to in 2023? Is it going to change your CCA plan?
It may, and I'd like to bring up Mr. Edwards, who's sort of taking the lead on the programming part of this, to try to explain how this would impact the CCA.
Okay. Mr. Edwards, why do you need a determination this month or this year on the jurisdictional question?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I may not be the best person to answer that. Michael may be better able to, Mr. Gottheimer may be better able to answer that. One thing I think is important to discuss, and whether we need to fully discuss here, but the CCA has a different operational plan than SOS or a retail supplier.
We understand that.
Okay, but that is a critical issue. So there was discussion, Mr. Trott talked about coming to an issue about whether we come to the commission for approval of rates or procurements. The CCA would likely make multiple procurements over a time period, and having to come to the commission every time we do that would prevent the CCA from operating in a way that makes it commercially successful.
Oh, you may underestimate our ability to act.
Perhaps I do. Michael.
So, Mr. Chairman, in direct response to your question about how a determination on this issue would affect the development of the aggregation plan and the overall design of the CCA, the difference, it's not a slight difference of opinion. There is a chasm of opinion.
We get that. There's an impasse. But would your CCA be different?
Yes.
And if you could briefly just explain so I could turn to my colleagues.
The way the reason that CCAs, one of the main reasons CCAs exist is to allow the local governmental entity via its supplier to make decisions for its residents with a Polar or SOS backstop, along with other retail options for the customers. And it is intended to be completely separate from the default service. If we can operate the CCA as we believe the statute intends, we will design a procurement process with robust safeguards and mechanisms in place to ensure that procurements are conducted in a way that is consistent with best commercial practices. If, on the other hand, the commission decides that the commission can scrutinize every bid, every price, review by some undefined measure whether a price is just and reasonable, would be completely redundant with the practices that the county will already be imposing on itself.
That's a great response, Mr. Gottheimer. You can leave it there. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Mr. Chairman, actually, before we go on to questions for the other commissioners, can we take a 5-minute break, please?
Yes, we can. 5-minute break. We'll reconvene at 11:50. Okay, the commission will come to order. Mr. Trout.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Bubar, I just wanted to add a little more detail to your question about the impact of timing on the bid schedule. So the first bids are going to be, for all the companies, going to be in October. We need to get that launched pretty soon because we have to brief all the bidders, show them all the documents, solicit their participation, then actually solicit their bids. So that's a tight timeline. The next marker that was brought to your attention by staff was April of next year, but that's what I wanted to add to. In January of next year, under option 2, which is the option to accommodate the October 2024 start date for the CCA, Potomac Edison would procure at least one block of residential supply with a 4-month contract. We're going to need multiple 4-month contracts, and we spread those out over time to try to reduce the price risk. The first of those blocks, under option 2, if that's what you approve today or in the next few days, the first of those blocks would be procured in January of 2023, which means that when you get the work group report from the CCA work group in January 2023, and then have to resolve it, there will be already one 4-month residential block for Potomac Edison. It won't be all the 4-month load, but there will be at least one. So that's the schedule impact.
Thank you.
If I might make one clarification I've just been asked to put on the record, and that is with respect to staff's position on CCA rate approval. It's very much actually what Mr. Trout articulated earlier, that is, we believe that the sort of approval that's needed is, that the statute kind of requires, is the type of approval you do for SOS and that type of review level you do. That is, the process was followed. It was followed correctly. The results appear to be reasonable within that process.
Thank you, Mr. Spivak. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to ask all the parties a question, and silence is a potential answer. Does any party have a concern with this commission making a decision today on the 2 options presented to us in the report, while the jurisdictional issues raised by Montgomery County are still pending before the work group? And I will take a no response, as we don't have a concern with you doing that today.
I'll do slightly better than that and say we have no concern with that, Mr. Commissioner.
That's an option as well, Mr. Spivak. Okay, hearing none, on the record, nobody had any concern with us making a decision today while there's still pending a question of jurisdictional authority between the county and the commission.
With the understanding that we've already said that we had issues with option 3.
Excuse me?
We've already said we had concerns about option 3.
No, that's our decision. I'm not asking you if you have concerns about option 3. I'm asking you if you have concerns that we make a decision, period, either option, while we still have pending jurisdictional questions. That's all I'm asking.
We understand that as you're right.
Do you have any concern with that? Because I need to be clear on the record.
We are very concerned about what would happen if you chose option 3.
That's not what I'm asking you.
Okay? I apologize if I'm not understanding your question.
Are you trying to tell me that you need the jurisdictional question resolved before we could choose option 3? What are you trying to tell me? Because you're kind of mixing them up in my mind here.
I apologize for that. It's certainly not my intent. Option 3, we don't believe actually resolves this issue.
I don't believe the commissioner is asking you to opine on option 1, 2, or 3.
Okay.
I'm saying, does anybody have a concern that we make a decision, whether you like it or not, on these options while we still have a pending jurisdictional question?
No.
Do you?
No.
Okay,
We
thank
understand
you.
you have that right.
Thank you. Mr. Trout.
So for purposes of clarity of the record, I will do what Mr. Spivak did and state affirmatively that Potomac Edison does not have any concerns with the commission deciding that issue today. In fact, we, through the work group, have brought it to you for your decision today.
Taylor Beckham from Potomac or Pepco Holdings. We, as well, for purposes of the record, do not have any issue with you deciding today option 1, option 2, option 3 while the jurisdictional issues are pending.
Thank you.
Saw not left out, James McGee from Prince George's County, no objections. Go
And OPC, let's get them on the record. OPC, you got any concerns?
We don't object to you making that
Okay.
decision today.
Anybody else out there? All right,
I'll say first, Cora, this doesn't impact BGE because we don't have that many customers, but we don't object.
I think the word in the report was de minimis impact on BG&E. Okay, very good. So it looks like we got everybody on the record. I'm sorry that was so difficult. I thought it would be easier and quickly done.
My apologies.
Mr. Krauthammer, I want to talk to you about comments you made with regard to what I perceive to be a express lack of concern about a short period of no contract. Is my perception correct? If it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 2 months, you don't seem to have a concern with that.
My concern, Mr. Commissioner, is that we are not going to have a period of 2 or 3 weeks.
How do you know? How do you know you're going to get bidders if we don't do this right?
Well, Montgomery County, as with all the counties in Maryland, have the benefit of being very sophisticated organizations. We are starting now more than 2 years in advance. This
I
has been-
appreciate Montgomery County's sophistication, but we understand that, but that's not my question. My question is, how do you know? How can you assure this commissioner that,
so
notwithstanding your sophistication, that
I understand
you're going to have bidders?
The plan is that we will file with this commission in April of 2023 a fully completed aggregation plan that is going to articulate in great detail every aspect of how the CCA is going to operate, a projected budget, what the different options for customers will be, opt-ins, opt-outs, potential termination, everything imaginable. It'll be published for comment to the public for 60 days. Sorry, it was April 3rd is when it's going to be published to the public. April 3rd, 2023, for 60 days. After that 60-day period, April, May, June, early June 2023, that plan will be filed with the commission for your review and approval. After we receive that in the early summer of 2023, the county will then have the official green light to proceed with the steps necessary to implement the CCA. The period between that early summer of 2023 and December 31st of 2023 will be a lot of planning, a lot of work is going to have to be done. Contracts will have to be developed, outreach to potential bidders. We will already have done projections, but we will update projections. We'll be working with utilities. Effective December 31st, 2023, as per the statute, the CCA will become a legal entity. It will be then allowed to operate and serve customers on January 1st, 2024, although because of the existing SOS contracts, we're deferring marketing activities or power deliveries until October 1st, 2024. So there's essentially a 2-year runway for delivering power. There are multiple triggers along the way in order to ensure that everything remains on track. The commission will, be apprised of progress. Stakeholders will be apprised of progress. The county will be engaging with the marketers and bidders, and procurements could actually start as early as January 1st, 2024. And there could be numerous procurements between January 1st, 2024 through October 1st.
Let me stop you there. So thanks for explaining the process as it's laid out in the public utility article pretty well. What I'm referring to is Mr. Trout, I believe, made commentary with regard to the potential volatility of bidders, and we've seen this, for short-term products. What if we go to a period where if we go with option 2, because you're vehemently opposed against option 3, what if we go through a period where someone says, I don't want to mess with that. They got this all messed up down there. I'm not bidding my stuff in there. And we have to go to the spot market. You said, I'm not worried about going to the spot market for a short time. At least that's what I think my ear heard. And that concerns me greatly, and that's what I'm asking about.
A few moments ago, a comment, the commission was informed of a situation in Ohio where customers were dropped out of the CCA on very short notice. I mean, the Montgomery County CCA is going to have a termination plan if such an event were to ever occur. But in any event, lessons learned, I mean, we knew these lessons, frankly, before what happened in Ohio happened. But best practices are to purchase early and often, similar to the way SOS works, but more likely the Montgomery County CCA will be purchasing power even more frequently. Like I said, the CCA will be allowed to operate and sign contracts as early as January 1st, 2024, 10 months in advance of power delivery. In any 10-month period of time, there could be risk or volatility in the market. That could happen in, for October 2024 or the spring of 2025. There's no reason to think that there is inherently more risk or volatility to beginning power delivery in 2024 versus 2025. But what we do know is that the CCA is going to utilize best practices and begin buying power early. And if it comes to pass that spring of 2024 rolls around and no contracts have been signed, and of course, by the way, all these procurements will be public, at that time some alarm bells might start reasonably to go off and some questions to be asked. But there will be a long lead time for that to happen before the risk of short-term procurements ever becomes a reality.
Are you familiar with ERCOT?
Yes, sir.
Familiar with the polar vortex and what happened down there?
Yes, sir.
February of 2021?
Very clearly.
They had to go to spot markets. And they had variable rate contracts.
Yes.
And those spot markets drove the price of electricity to some $9,600 per megawatt hour.
Yes.
It's normally in the $50 range. That was a disaster for the state of Texas.
Yes, it was.
And I'm just trying to probe to make sure that we're not setting Montgomery County up for that.
To the contrary.
Well,
I mean, to the contrary to what happened in ERCOT.
So we look at short-term contracts and short-term products every year in our SOS bidding process, and your county may follow that a little bit, but I know that those short-term products sometimes affect the number of bidders that we have. They do.
If I may ask, what short-term contracts are you referring to?
Well, I'm not going to get into the SOS bidding process, and I'm not going to start answering your question.
No, I'm sorry. I only intended it as for clarification to the question to me, because it sounds like you're asking me about short-term contracts.
So option two has some disjointed, smaller windows of
for PE.
That's right.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, well, so that you're actually highlighting one of the risks of SOS, which is that it is a very rigid, fixed schedule.
I know, and that's why I'm asking about how that risk transfers to CCA.
Well,
you're saying no problem. We don't. Well, we think it's sometimes a concern. I'm very concerned about that sometimes.
The 4-month contract is what you're referring to. Okay. So the 4-month contract will be subject to the safeguards that that are established already in the SOS. And we understand it's a little bit of a transitional period, but because of the external monitor that you bring in and the use of the the PAT, the price anomaly threshold, for example, the bids can be rejected, and if there is a polar vortex, that 4-month contract, would be. I would expect that the commission would delay the auction for the 4-month contract to allow something like a polar vortex to occur. But this does remind me of some earlier statements about breaking, SOS. And, SOS, it's true, has been a fairly smoothly running operation for 20 years. But SOS was never intended to be forever. It was intended to be a transitional product vehicle so that customers could ultimately transition off of that to a more diverse portfolio of products. We have some of that in Maryland now, and Montgomery County seeks to offer more of that
Yeah,
to
the
its
market,
residents.
the market penetration didn't develop. I was in the legislature in '99 when we developed customer choice.
Yes, sir.
And the market penetration for retail suppliers never developed to accommodate that.
And
It
that's
just
why
hasn't happened. So I think SOS is here to stay.
Well, that's why we're so excited about the CCA. That's exactly why we're so excited about the CCA.
Well, I just want you to be aware that your comments concerned me enough to go down this line of questioning, because not only on option 2 do we make a decision for Montgomery County and the sophisticated people there, but also for Frederick County and Washington County and Garrett County and Allegheny County, Carroll County, and they're your brethren in, or I don't know what the right pronoun is these days. That stuff confuses me. But they're your fellow members of the Maryland Association of Fellow. That's probably not even right.
Obviously, I meant
they're your co-members of the Maryland Association of Counties, and you're affecting them, all those jurisdictions as well, with this decision, potentially because of the perturbation of the SOS bidding process.
I'm glad that you asked me to clarify my point about the short-term contracts, because I thought at first you were asking about like spot market purchases for Montgomery County. Now I understand you're asking about 4-month contracts for other counties. Obviously, I was referring in my reference to sophistication to all of Maryland's counties equally. But again, I didn't mean to suggest that there was that there wasn't a mechanism in place to conduct the transitional bids so that Montgomery County can establish and operate successfully the CCA. That's why the SOS process is in place, and it will operate as it has successfully for these transitional bids.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure where I'm at on this, but I do have some concerns that it's not clear to me. I think option 2 is the right way to go, but I'm not 100% certain because of how this could impact other parts of the state. So.
Well, the break will the break of Montgomery County will occur at one point or another, so there will have to be a series of transitional auctions at one point or another. So whether it happens now or later, those shorter bids are going to occur.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that you have the appropriate level of concern in the county, because I didn't hear it in your comments.
We absolutely do. My lack of concern was for the risk of Montgomery County ending up in the spot market. That is the issue that we do not believe to be a reality.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do my other colleagues have questions? Commissioner Linton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a couple of questions. First, for staff, Mr. Spivak, in your interpretation of the statute regarding the Commission's authority to review the products that the county is offering, you referenced it as an approval process that would be similar to what the Commission does currently for SOS. If the county offers more than one product, is it your thinking that the Commission would review all of the products or just one base product?
I think it may very well depend on how that actually plays out. I think certainly the base product, the other products may be less likely, but I'm not really. I think again we'd have to actually see what it's more likely to look like before we really determined what kind of level of review. I think you could say the outside level of review would be kind of what the commission does for SOS.
Okay. Judge Grace.
Can I take a stab at that?
Sure.
So, for the products that might be green products, or let's just use that for an example. The commission may elect to take those products as they take a supplier's products, in that you approve the supplier and then the supplier does what the supplier does. And we don't see it again until maybe it comes to us with a complaint. But with regards to the product that you're elected into, if you don't affirmatively take action to opt out by sending in the mailer, that product becomes default for Montgomery County customers. So the commission may take a stronger look closer to SOS, or maybe something in between on that. So it may differ from product to product.
If I may just respond, as a quick follow-up. When the CCA launches, any other products besides the basic product are not going to be turned over to a supplier to do what they want. Everything is going to be described long in advance in the aggregation plan. It'll be subject to the checks and balances and the goals of Montgomery County. There are very strict procurement laws already in place in Montgomery County that, needless to say, far exceed the decisions that a retail supplier takes for itself. So I just wanted to clarify that any optional products will not receive any less scrutiny than whatever the basic product turns out to be. But again, there's no legal distinction between the quote, basic product or any other products that the county might offer. There is still SOS. And of all the services that we all subscribe to in our day-to-day lives, there are fewer that are easy to switch than your energy supplier. So we don't believe that there's either a basis in the law or a policy reason to apply any greater scrutiny to the basic product as to any other products.
Well, I wasn't expecting you to answer that question, but since you have, are you suggesting that if after all of the county's scrutinization and review of these potentially alternate products, that if a consumer from Montgomery County elects to choose one, and in the end decides or determines that it was not in their benefit, are you suggesting that that would be their fault? Because the county has scrutinized it and determined it to be a proper product, but the consumer, after trying to use it, decides they don't like it or it doesn't benefit them?
A decision has not yet been made as to whether there will be one product on day one or multiple products on day one. The idea is that over time, at least, there will be multiple products. Time that they do not like for whatever reason.
A product that's been approved through whatever scrutinization process the county uses.
They can switch within the portfolio, or they can switch to a retail supplier or back to SOS.
And so what happens to the financial impact, as the case may be, to that consumer that picked the county's product that was approved by the county, that the consumer determines that is not in their benefit?
Well, there's not going to be, I'm not sure exactly how to answer the question, because I'm not sure what risks, I can't think of what risks you may be asking about. If a customer doesn't like a product, they can just switch to another product.
Well, what we've seen is historically here at the commission in situations like this, what we've seen is consumers pick a product, and they think it's the product that they would like. And then it turns out that the product is more expensive, for example, and that financial impact it becomes a problem for them. And so the commission has had to investigate those types of matters before, and as you may know, the end result could be any number of different things, which could include refunding customers money back to the consumer. So if the county is doing all of the review and approval of those other than base products, we'll just say it like that, describe it that way. And again, the consumer determines that it's not something in their interest. What are we to do with that consumer then?
I had intended to turn it over to my colleagues even before I was tapped on the shoulder, but I'll just turn it over.
Commissioner, I just want to clarify that the statute's very clear to us, and we are very clear and have been very clear in the work group process throughout this discussion that we have a customer protection obligation as a county. All the products that the county would offer through the CCA would be clearly explained to customers, and there would not be a rate that they picked. If they said, I like the green option, it has this rate, we would clearly explain what that rate is, how long it's good for, what their options are if that rate changes. So there's no, I don't think that there will be any bait and switch, if you will, on a consumer. We will be very upfront about what their options are and what the pros and cons are of picking different options.
Well, I will tell. I have all of the confidence that the county can conduct that type of advanced review, but I'll just caution that we've heard that before from companies that have had lots of experience across the country and was very confident that the product they were offering would be the best one on the market. And then we have a different opinion from the People's Council or the staff or someone else, and there's a whole other review in the back end. So I just wanted to, and I was asking staff because I thought it was a position that they had taken, but I appreciate the answer. I did have another different question for the county. If
Can I just elaborate on that? Because I think it's important because CCAs are so new to Maryland that although there will be an official, like a supplier of record, the decisions, the design of the products, the pricing, the different supply mix, the fuel mix that goes into the different products, durations, terms and conditions, time of use rate, demand response, energy efficiency, weekend, night, EV rate, whatever that all might be. These are all decisions that are going to be made exclusively by Montgomery County, by the experts within Montgomery County. I just wanted to make sure that there's no misconception that any decisions that affect customers are going to be in any way delegated to another party, a third party, or a retail supplier. Everything's going to be made by the county, by the elected officials and the professionals within the county.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
The work group is working on consumer protection regs right now, and the work group has for many weeks been working on regs regarding what will go into the report that the commission sees when it affirms the county as a CCA, and what level of detail will be in that report. And as a preview and directly related to what you're saying, those will be some decisions that we'll be asking the commission to make in January.
Thank you. I see the People's Council has joined the microphone.
Good morning, David Lapp here on behalf of the Office of People's Counsel with Ms. Wiggins. If you'll indulge me just for a moment. First, to quickly address Commissioner Linton, your question. Yes, there as Judge Grace said, there are aspects of consumer protection that are the Commission's responsibilities, but ultimately it is Montgomery County that is responsible, and the way community choice, community aggregation, I think as contemplated by the General Assembly, and as reflected in the language of the statute, ultimately it's Montgomery County elected officials that are responsible for those decisions. And a consumer unhappy with their results as a result of Montgomery's process, part of their their recourse is to vote for a new county executive, vote for a new county council, and get different results. And that is what community aggregation is ultimately about. It's about local accountability. I also wanted to just comment on Commissioner O'Donnell's really good questions about price volatility. First, I should say, we very much support the Montgomery County's aggregation process. We think it really has the potential to bring good results for our clients, residential customers. And we think that that the commission, the General Assembly, in enacting the statute, did see a need to balance Montgomery County's authority and making it possible for them to move forward quickly and efficiently on a time schedule that begins no later than December 31st, 2023. That it do that, but it also directed this commission to protect standard offer service customers, and the language in the statute says that the plan must protect standard offer service customers outside of Montgomery County. So that would be Prince George's County, and that would be the other counties, Garrett, Frederick, that Potomac Edison serves. And as Mr. Trout said earlier, the commission's task is to balance those obligations. So the question Commissioner O'Donnell asked about price volatility, that is one concern, but there's also a concern about a risk premium as a result of shorter term contracts. And so what we would see with option 2 would be a number of 4-month contracts, which the commission has not approved for residential customers in the past, and that those 4-month contracts would make up 50% of the summer load. And we think that that is risky for residential customers to have 50% on 4-month contracts, where there might be plenty of bidders, but all those bidders might have a risk premium because it's only 4 months. And so that's why but on the other hand, for Pepco's customers in Prince George's County, the option 2 has 8-month periods, which is twice as long. It's still a reduction. We have tried to assess that as best we can and said, okay, option 2 is a possibility. We think it doesn't change as much for the Prince George's County customers because we're moving from 12 months to 8 months. But for Potomac Edison customers, to have 50% of them on 4-month contracts is a risk. And we recognize that makes it more difficult for Montgomery County to market its CCA program. But we think that's a hurdle that can be overcome, and that accepting option 2 for Pepco's Montgomery County customers, but not accepting that option and delaying, as the community aggregation statute allows the commission, delaying that for the customers in the Potomac Edison customers in Montgomery County it strikes the balance in the right way. Montgomery County can still move forward with customer aggregation on October 1, 2024 for 85%. The Potomac Edison customers can come in a little bit later. I appreciate your indulgence. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually had a different question from Montgomery County. I suspect the People's Council did raise a separate set of issues, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if any of my colleagues wanted to respond to that. My other question wasn't related to that point.
Commissioner O'Donnell, did you have a direct follow-up?
I did have a follow-up on Commissioner Linton's original question.
My original question. I could feel the follow-up. I just didn't know where it was coming from.
So the statutory authorization for this is light on consumer protections. Doesn't say much. Says, you have to tell the customers what the rights and responsibilities are, and you have to provide for electricity access, reliability, and equitable treatment of all residential and small commercial electric customers in the county. But beyond that, it doesn't say a whole lot about consumer protections. It talks about operations and stuff. I guess you could stretch that out there a little bit. But I'd like to have a sense of, for instance, we have our Consumer Affairs Division, CAD. And when there's a complaint against a third-party supplier, they come to our CAD, or a utility, they come to our CAD. And the CAD says, and there's protocols, got to go to the utility first, or supplier, try to resolve it. If you can't, you can file an informal complaint, and if you're not satisfied with the disposition of that, you can file a formal complaint. And if you're not satisfied with that, you can file an appeal with the CAD, and then you can take your appeal to the commission itself, right? So there are several levels of adjudicatory process on these consumer complaints. But we're an independent regulator. We don't have a vested interest in any of the decisions that are made up that chain. But you will. You're the county. You're going to have a vested interest, notwithstanding elected officials, because I was one for 21 years longer. Sometimes you can't fight City Hall because, well, it's a little more different than an independent agency that has a public interest at heart. It's not the same thing. Trust me, it's not. So tell me a little bit about what you're going to do to protect the consumers when there's a complaint at the county. And I'm sure that it's going to be put in regulation, so Judge Grace may want to weigh in on this too.
So as Mr. Edwards said, we are very, very attuned to issues relating to consumer protection. I, in fact, worked for the county's Office of Consumer Protection for many years before I became employed by the Office of the County Attorney. So not only is it personally important to me, but we are very aware of it in regards to the CCA. We are participating in those conversations, as Judge Grace said. There will be consumer protection regulations. That is literally number one in the statute on the list of regulations. Number one is consumer protection. So we anticipate complying with that. You know, we might have our own internal process if a consumer wants to bring something to us, obviously, as the county. But the county is the CCA will presumably have its own process as well, especially if it's a licensed supplier.
So you will have a Consumer Affairs Division that has a specific process for these electricity complaints?
I can't commit to that. I don't believe we've spoken at that particular question. We
And
have
who will be the final arbiter before the consumer has the right to take it to the circuit court in Montgomery County?
I don't think we've thought that specific process through yet. We have been discussing the consumer protection.
Fair enough. I know there's a lot of work to do here, but there's a lot of thinking to be done here too.
There is, and we are eager. I cannot describe how eager we are to get started on that, and that's why, you know, we're here today trying to make sure that we can put that together.
This is
viable
contrary to the Office of People's Counsel's opinion. This is not the same level of protection that an independent regulatory authority, in my opinion, can offer the public, as opposed to the fox guard in the hen house situation. So, anyway, that's just my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. I don't want to cut short our discussion today, but we do have a hard stop at 12:45, so I return to Commissioner Linton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My other question was, I hope would be an easy one to answer, but for the county, you're laughing because there's no easy questions. All right. Well, I really just wanted a very succinct or clear answer as to why 2024 was your date to begin, the proposed date for you to begin. And I'll just qualify by saying, and I didn't see a clear answer in your filing, and the technical staff suggested that it just said very clearly just said that the county refused a date in 2025. So help me to understand why. What's magic about that time?
The short answer, I know you want a short answer, but I would request the chance to elaborate. The short answer is we voluntarily agreed to that date so this PIP process could take place. The statute allows that beginning December 31st, 2023, the county can form a community choice aggregator. And as I've said, our hope is to be ready to go on that day.
Why?
However,
Why?
why? Because this is an integral part of our climate action plan. Reducing greenhouse gases in Montgomery County, we think that to make that happen, this CCA is an integral part of that plan. And Mr. Edwards can talk about that for days. When I say we're eager to do this, I am not exaggerating. So the statute says beginning December 1st, 31st, 2023, the county can form a community choice aggregator. If we became aware, so that would have been our, that would have been ideal, January 1st, 2024. We understood that because of this PIP process that there were some complications that would arise, and it is not our intent to harm anybody else when we are advancing our goals. So we voluntarily agreed to that date. That was a request that came to us, and we did agree. That being said, we really want to commit to doing this as soon as possible. If we get these issues resolved, if we believe there's a viable path forward, we believe that we can transfer the load of Montgomery County customers on October 1st, 2024. So I hope that answers your question. We believe it's in with our right to say when we would like to start. We understand that the commission absolutely has the authority to create a process to mitigate the volumetric risk to the SOS process. But we believe that the start date is important for us.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the county for the answers to my question. Now, I just wanted to make one additional comment. Actually, this was for Judge Grace. No, it's not a question. You don't have to. I just wanted to point out that I'm looking forward to reading your report in January. I'm sure all my colleagues are as well, but as a person who's had to lead some complex work group discussions before, we basically got a little taste of one for like the last hour or so. It's like we were in the work group here, but it's complicated enough just to deal with it in the room, but to try and have those discussions in front of the commission is also tough. So I've been in that same spot, in the same kind of scenario where parties wanted to bring it to the commission, and I was reluctant to do so. So I appreciate the preparation and just needing to deal with it today, and I'm looking forward to the report. So thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let's see if I can keep this very tight and to the point here. We've heard today that that additional proceeding is going to be requested by Montgomery County. Is that correct? Something in advance of January?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Spivak, it was expressed that we possibly could take care of some of those threshold questions in an AM setting. Do you believe that would be the type of setting that staff would envision to get into the details, I guess the findings that you would like to lead?
Well, as I said, staff's preference is to keep it within the working group and to resolve it as a matter of the working group. But if the commission is inclined to address it sooner and separately, then I would say you would be well advised to seek the parties' briefs on the issues and then to hold a hearing, an oral argument, and that could be done after an admin or the end of an admin or simply on a date when you set it. But I think both of those would be advisable.
Okay. And Ms. President, is that how you would envision such a proceeding? I mean, do you have some of those threshold issues that you believe that you could bring to the commission that would, I guess, anticipate some of the issues that would come up later in the January?
Absolutely. And when I say this has been sort of discussed to the point of impasse in the work group, these issues are sort of our positions and our reasonings have been fleshed out in the work group, in the CCE work group.
Okay.
So yes, so our request was that this be placed on an administrative agenda, an administrative meeting agenda, but absolutely with the opportunity for stakeholders to file their comments. And as I said, if required or requested, we would be happy to file a more formal request for commission guidance. I know that, I've tried to, there's not really a formal answer to what happens if there's an impasse in a work group, but my understanding is that either the work group leader or parties to the work group can bring a request to the commission or commission for guidance. So we would be happy to file that formal request if that's what is desired. Maybe you've heard enough about the initial thoughts today, where you just want to schedule it and then have everybody file comments. But absolutely with the opportunity for all the stakeholders that wish to file their positions.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And just speaking for myself, I would like to be supportive of the county moving forward. I think this is a unique legislation just for the county. I know the county has worked on this for a number of years to get to this point, and so I certainly would not want us to do anything here that frustrates or delays the county in achieving what it'd like to do. So in that, you can put in a specific request on what some of those threshold issues are that you think would inform what happens in the January report. I for one would be interested to hear that and how that might advance the proceedings. So I hope that you can work with staff, and if that's the direction you're going to go and ask for a formal proceeding, so that we can hopefully come up with something that would be most helpful to advance this process. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Whatever process, if preferred, I would be happy to file a formal request for commission guidance, so that we can have this heard before the January 1st or the January work report gets filed. So yeah.
Well, Ms. Brennan, if
thought we'd sort of
Commissioner Richard, if I could interrupt, it's not our preference. This is your decision. It's not our desire. It's what Montgomery County. We cannot prevent you from filing a petition. We would ask that you work with Judge Grace and the work group, but it seems, at least to me, that you believe you've exhausted any remedies in the work group. I heard something different from Judge Grace, however, earlier today. But at the end of the day, it's not collectively or individually our opinions. You have the right to file that petition.
Yeah, and that I guess what I was trying to communicate as well, because again, if it's going to, the county is going to be required to seek other remedies, go back to the legislature for clarification. I think we probably need to know that sooner than later. At least that's my opinion. So
agreed. So our thought was to ask for it to be placed on an administrative meeting agenda in the near future, so that we could focus on this issue and all the stakeholders could file comments. If that is not the choice today, we would be happy to file a formal request for commission guidance and let that process take its place.
Okay, yeah, from my understanding today,
Either
we're
way,
very
yes.
narrowly, we're just making a decision on a transition option on SOS. But again, from what I've heard today, it sounds like the county would like to go further than that. So to crystallize, I think what the chairman said, this is, I guess the ball's in your court now.
We will happily.
And I can speak as one that I'd be interested to hear what we might do in advance of January that might assist in again, accelerating this process.
We appreciate that.
Thanks. Can I just ask one other question, Mr. Lapp, or I guess Director Lapp, or OPC, with whoever, just on the I'm sorry.
I was just going to make a point about what Counselor made.
To my question, or to
Commissioner O'Donnell, but I'll wait till the end.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I just wanted to get just a clarification. What I've heard today is we do have, we do need to move quickly so that in October we can proceed with the auctions. What, can we go with option 2 today? And can some of these other issues be resolved as far as, later transition in the work group process or through just agreement with the county? Because I guess I do hesitate in holding up, the PE customers when it comes to the SOS auctions coming up next month.
And if Ms. Wiggins can correct me if I have this wrong, but my understanding is that option 2 does actually establish the 4-month. It is
Correct.
the 4-month option. So if you adopt option 2 today, you would be agreeing to the 4-month, several 4-month procurements for Potomac Edison. That's why we're asking that you not adopt it for Potomac Edison and
Okay.
issue an order using the authority that you have to schedule to mitigate the risks on SOS customers outside of Montgomery County, that you delay the community choice aggregation movement of
the back end.
PE customers until June 1 of 2025.
Okay. Well, thank you for that clarification. With that, no other questions.
That was actually the point of clarification that I'd like to
Okay,
make.
briefly.
Okay, very briefly, a 10-second point. PEPCO is not going to not have 4-month contracts under option 2. There's a 25% contract procurement of 4-month procurement that would happen under option 2. It would just be the 16, 8, 12, then a 4-month. So I just wanted to make it clear that that wasn't off the table for PEPCO. And so that's, again, why PEPCO would also go with option 3. Just that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell has one follow-up.
I want to make sure, and I almost lost my train of thought because we've been kind of all over the map here. But Commissioner Richard was clarifying with you that, and the chairman made clear that you could file anything you want. But I just want to make sure that you understand, we may defer to the work group to resolve this issue. That may be the majority, I don't know, because we haven't taken a vote. But if we have to, I suspect that the majority of the commission is going to want to try to leave the work group resolve your issues. So I just want to make sure you understood that as well. We're not signaling to you, you should file something so we can give you what you want.
I understand. I just want to make sure, what my options are for my client, essentially.
Yep.
But I understand.
You're free to file anything you want, and we're free to take anything under advisement for as long as we want.
Understood.
I just
Duly
want to
noted.
make that
Thank
clear. Okay, thank you.
I think Commissioner Linton has.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for purposes of pouring even more salt on it, I just wanted to make sure that, and I'm sure the parties understand this already, but just to be clear, the work group process isn't just opportunities for everybody to share their opinions or perhaps even more so their positions. It really is a mediative dispute resolution negotiation type of process. The whole point is that when you walk out of there, you probably aren't going to be thrilled with what you got, but it's something that will work for all of the customers of the state and perhaps for your constituents or clients. It's hard for me to hear that there's been an impasse at a work group meeting, because that means that there's really hard positions there and there's not the opportunity for give and take. And that's what's supposed to happen there. Because if you come to the commission, as you've already heard, somebody's going to be very unhappy because we're going to have to vote one way or the other based on the options in front of us. So the work group process is a good opportunity to try and resolve some of these matters before you get to the point where the commissioners have to make the decisions for you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Very sage advice. At this point, I will call a motion, and my motion will be to approve staff's option 2. So we'll take a vote on that. I would move that we note the report on the 2022 procurement improvement process. Move that we approve the revised request for proposals and fall requirements service agreement as filed by staff. And finally, move that we approve the utilities standard offer service bid documents, including specifically the PEPCO and Potomac Edison alternative bid schedules with bidding on Pepco's 8 months contracts in January or April 2023, and bidding for Potomac Edison as stated in its plan, which is consistent with staff's option number 2 to accommodate the potential Montgomery County Community Choice Aggregation Program. The vote begins with Commissioner Bubar.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'm not an attorney, Mr. Chairman, but I played one in the legislature. This is some pretty complicated stuff, but it's always good to be underestimated because I play a country lawyer. A little hayseed never hurts. I'll vote aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Commissioners.